Now we're gonna move into another panel where we'll talk about mitigating corruption through development within public sector. Looks like that's one of the solutions after we've discussed so much on corruption and what should we do. So we're gonna ask Chris Dube. Chris Dube will moderate, and Chris is the chairman of the GGA Management Committee, Head of Governance, Insight and Analytics at Good Governance in Africa. Welcome, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Chrissy Dube, so you just add a Y to the S. So it's Chrissy. Chris is a different Chris, I think, in Good Governance Africa, but I am Chrissy Dube. And hello, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here speaking about practical ways to mitigate corruption through the development in the public sector. I have an esteemed panel joining me in person and online. I'm glad that it's a ladies' panel in person. And we always know that in one way or another, gentlemen are absent, whether it's mentally or something. But the gentlemen are present this time, they're online. I'd like to invite my first panelist, who is Martha. As she comes down, please give her a hand. The only lady on the panel is favorite. Martha is a multiple award winner. She's the Director General of the Anti-Corruption Bureau in Malawi. And just in the interest of time, I'll highlight a few awards that she has received: Woman of the Year and Personality of the Year, Female Public Servant of the Year. And in 2021, Martha was among the 12 anti-corruption champions across the globe. This is according to the United States State Department. Welcome, Martha. And online, I'm joined by Dr. Solomon and Prof. Alexis. Can they hear us?
I can hear you very clear.
I think that we will dive straight into the discussion, Martha. The first question that I have for you is, can you share some successful strategies that you've implemented in Malawi to combat corruption within the public sector, and what were the key success factors contributing to these strategies?
Thank you so much, Chrissy, and thank you so much, BEF, for inviting me. It's my first time, so I'm a newbie in the group. It's been such enriching 2 days. So I am the DG of ACB Malawi, which is the lead institution in the fight against corruption in Malawi. A lot has happened in the past 29 months we have been in the bureau. But like this year, the ACB is celebrating 25 years of its existence, of its operations. And we've done quite a deep analysis of its operations and the impact that it has had. And so far, what we've seen is that in as far as the public sector is concerned, where most of the corruption, as you know, happens, some of the success strategies that we've used in the Bureau is the establishment of what we are calling institutional integrity committees. So these are committees that are established under the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. The National Anti-Corruption Strategy is the blueprint that Malawi is following in as far as bringing the country together in the fight against corruption. So what these institutional integrity committees do is that within the public institutions where they are located, they are supposed to be baby ACBs, like baby anti-corruption bureaus, where they conduct anti-corruption awareness within the institution, do corruption risk assessments within the institution. They also receive and investigate allegations of corruption at that level, and where they cannot handle them at that level, that's when they refer them to the Anti-Corruption Bureau. but they also monitor procurement processes and recruitment processes within the Bureau. What have made the IICs to be pretty effective is the political will that is there. So with the establishment of the IICs, we got, there was a policy directive from the Office of the President and Cabinet where they directed all the ministries, departments, and agencies to allocate 1% of their monthly allocation to the activities of IICs. And one thing also that has just been implemented, or something that we are implementing, is the involvement of the Legal Affairs Committee. Parliament being an oversight institution, so we have they've got this oversight, and then they've got the legislative role, where we have found as a bureau that some MDAs are not as active in as far as the establishment of the IICs, or if the IICs are just existing on paper, we are mandated to report to Parliament. And whilst this has been on the books for some time, it's only in the recent months when we have seen our Parliament actually summoning the heads of these institutions. And the process is quite hectic. It's in the presence of the media, and it's quite embarrassing. And that alone has seen most of the MDAs establishing these IICs and making sure that they're actually operating. And then the next strategy that we've used is the vetting of the single sourcing and high value procurements. As you may be aware, procurement, that's where the fertile ground for corruption is. That's where the public sector meets the private sector. So a law was amended, I think in 2017, the Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Act, where the Anti-Corruption Bureau was given the mandate under its general and corruption prevention mandate to be vetting the high value and single sourcing procurement. What this has done is to prevent a lot of corruption that would have happened in the procurement of public goods. The next strategy that we've used is strict monitoring of service delivery projects and even construction projects. As I think Philip was talking earlier this morning about the impact of corruption, and quoting General Secretary of UN, the former Kofi Annan. He says it takes public goods, we all know it takes public goods into the private pockets. That's what corruption does. So what we have done with this strict monitoring is to make sure that that is being budgeted for in the national budget actually finds its way on the ground, in form of a hospital, in form of a road and everything. So this is something that we started at a small level, but it's something that going forward, as we are thinking of repositioning our functions, we want to put much emphasis on. And the reason why we've done this is because we have found out that no matter how much we do or emphasize on law enforcement, we will never prosecute our way out of corruption. And this brings me to another strategy that we have also implemented, which is dealing with depoliticizing anti-corruption funds. So I'm not sure about your countries, but back home, the Anti-Corruption Bureau would be used by politicians to deal with their political opponents, such that if I'm being appointed by a current government, the expectation is that I simply deal with the old corruption. And what has been happening is that it's just a vicious cycle that keeps on repeating itself. And what we did, because this is the government that came on the platform of anti-corruption, was to deal with to give a shock factor to the corruption problem in Malawi. And I remember when I was coming from my interview at Parliament, a reporter asked me, what exactly do you want to achieve? I said, I want to make people uncomfortable with corruption. It shouldn't be, impunity should not be guaranteed. And so what we did was to make sure that we follow up on the current corruption that was happening at the particular time. And this led to, and as I think Philip also mentioned, that political will, we shouldn't underestimate it. There was a lot of political will at that time. But we also need to realize that the space for that political will is usually very short and narrow. You don't have as much time. And so within a short period of time, we did a lot of high-profile investigations. That indeed brought a shock factor into the country. We arrested very senior cabinet ministers holding very senior cabinet portfolios. We have even arrested as far as the sitting vice president of the country, who is at the moment going through a prosecution over a kind of a state capture level of corruption allegations. What that has done is that much as there's still corruption, you cannot hold it, but there's been a deterrence in as far as the use of investigations and prosecutions is concerned. And then the intense public education that we've done, we have not only just telling people about the evils of corruption, but trying to personalize that message so that when you are talking to them about 5 million that has been stolen at Capitol Hill, they should be able to know that that means they are Panadol at the local health clinic. And what that has done is a great appreciation or understanding of the evils of corruption, such that I think it almost felt like there's been an overload of corruption messages, and maybe it wasn't very comfortable for politicians because just to, maybe to demonstrate how much our message has gone to the ground, there was of course a survey that was done an IPO survey that was done in 2019, which revealed that 98% of Malawians understand corruption concepts. But maybe to further demonstrate that in very real times, on 6th of December, because of all the work that we've been doing, when they say that corruption fights and it fights back viciously, I actually saw it because on 6th December, I was arrested in the early morning, picked by police, 30 police people, put me in a car, drove me outside 50 kilometers to a police station in Rome. That's 6th of December, 3 days before the International Anti-Corruption Day. Well, a lot of things happened. I think that's a subject for another day. But I was released later that day, basically because of public outcry. And 3 days later, I happened to be at this function, International Anti-Corruption Day, in one of the districts in Malawi. It's a district called Kasongo. It's actually a stronghold of the ruling party. So after we had done the function, I had seen the president off. I was too traumatized with everything that had happened. I happened to see myself just standing. I was waiting for someone to pick me. I don't know what I was waiting for, but I just stood on the ground. And at the corner of my eye, I saw these women. I could sense that there are some women, and these women seemed to be wanting to talk to me. But these are very local village poor women, because it was a local district where we were. They are putting on their party materials, torn party materials. I could sense these women want to talk to me, but I think they're trying to get some courage. And then about 6 of them just came to me and they hugged me. And as they hugged me, they're crying. Because in my language, they're saying, my daughter, everyone narrating where they were when they heard about my arrest. I was at the river, I was in the garden, I was what, and they're crying. And they say, we know the reason why they arrested you. It's because you are fighting for us. Now, at that moment, of course, it was just an emotional space that we were at that moment. But what really hit me is when we are sitting in our offices, in the room, wherever we are, we know why we are doing what we do. But most people, the people that we are doing it for, which are these women, they don't know why we do. They don't know what we are doing. And at that moment, it hit me that these women get it. And so I'm just trying to emphasize that our public education has been so good to an extent that it has people actually know what corruption is and what it means to them. I think the last one which I want to add, another strategy, is maybe something that you can't write on paper, but what I call conspirators of good people. You know, in the public service, you have very good ethical people working alongside the very corrupt ones. Good public institutions working alongside. So it's not fair sometimes to just paint everyone as corrupt. You need to identify them. And what I've seen is that if you use these people who are all over the public service, you can actually achieve a lot. I mean, we've had situations where there is political pressure. You know there is political pressure probably to approve a very corrupt procurement. And you know probably that Martha in the whole process will be very vulnerable. But there's someone who also has to do something on that. And you say, okay, just do this through a call or a meetup. On my side, this is how I'm gonna prevent this. And I've had situations where if someone in the procurement authority is unable to prevent it, I can do it from SAB. And there have been moments when even all of us have failed to stop it. But someone from Ministry of Finance will find something within the regulations that stops it. And that I call conspirators of good people. These are people that you can't mention them, but they are there and they have helped a lot in terms of preventing corruption. Now, when you ask me about what has really allowed that, I think I cannot emphasize more on political will. And just to emphasize that this space is never there all the time. It's very narrow and short. And that it is very important that you exploit it if as much as you can within a short period of time. And then there's collaboration and coordination. I've talked about the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. Under this strategy, it's a blueprint for Malawi where everyone is supposed to be involved in the anti-corruption efforts. So under this, we got the private sector, we got the faith, we got the CSOs, we got the chiefs, the traditional leaders, we got the religious people, we got the youth, we got the women. Each one of these pillars have got a form, their heads form the National Integrity Committee. And us as SCB, we are the secretariat, we come together and come up with strategies on anti-corruption. Again, transparency and accountability. Institutions like ours usually never talk to the media and whatever. But one thing that I can safely say is that maybe had it not been for the involvement of the media, for us being able to put the information out, probably I wouldn't have been alive. There have been things that have had to come in the media, and that alone has protected some of the people within the institution. And I'm so glad that that has been recognized, because we are always giving out information to the extent that we can within the boundaries of the law. But we've been very vigilant to always speak to the media, to update, to talk to the people through the media, update the public on what we are doing and where we are with things. And because of that, the Bureau this year was awarded the second best performer in as far as anti-corruption, access to information is concerned. This year by two institutions, the Malawi Human Rights Commission and the Public Relations Society of Malawi. So I think that has been quite huge.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Martha, for your insights in that regard. I think it's evident that we can all see why you have been a multiple award winner with all of the work that you've done to the point of getting arrested. What's funny for me with the police in Malawi, there's some similarities with South African police. You can report theft or robbery, and trust me, 30 police are not going to come to your rescue, especially not on time. But the minute it's corruption related, you had a whole army of police, which is interesting for me. I see that the gentlemen online have proved me wrong and are both present now. I'd like to welcome Dr. Solomon and Prof. Alexis. In the interest of time, Dr. Solomon is Head of Public Administration Ethics, Integrity and Disciplinary Unit in the Department of Public Service and Administration. He was, prior to that, a senior manager in Integrity Management Unit of the National Prosecuting Authority, which is the APA. And also before that, a counterintelligence officer in the South African National Defense Force, which is the military intelligence. And my question to you is that South Africa has its fair share of corruption-related challenges. Could you highlight some recent reforms or policies that aim to strengthen the public sector ethics and integrity, and what impact are they expected to have in this regard?
Good afternoon, Ms. Dube and fellow panelists, especially Ms. Chizuma, which I had the pleasure to meet before. If you talk about some of the reforms or the policies that we had recently put in place, I must indicate that after the sad state capture period that we had in South Africa, currently we're working on a lot of new reforms and policy development. The area of reform for the public sector, as you would know, is mostly on the professionalization of the public servant. And in that regard, there was a professionalization framework that was brought out that looked at the recruitment of people, the promotion of especially managers, and the integrity testing around that. But also, as part of that, to look at our legislation, and specifically for the public service, to look at the public service regulations that we have in place. And from yesterday, we have a new set of public service regulations where we have changed the 2016 regulations with a bigger emphasis on adopting behavioral codes of conduct that can drive professionalization. But most of all, and for me specifically, what I was happy about is that there's now a choice of the ethics of the HODs, the heads of departments, to appoint an ethics officer, because that was the biggest challenge that we had, where ethics officers were actually changed every year, and it makes training and interventions very difficult. But what we also changed in the regulations is to address the financial disclosure system, where we have now also included more information, for example, to be included. And that will, of course, strengthen our lifestyle audit process. So in short, that was the major one. But if I can come to the policy development that we have, I think the best one to focus a bit on is that of only started in 2021 with lifestyle audits as the public service, where we're now in the second year, and we have a fully automated e-disclosure system that is tested, where public servants disclose their financial interests on. We link that to a system like the deeds office. We link it to the CIPC, where companies' detail are. We link it to a number of, like the Inatus system as well, so that this can be the backbone for lifestyle audits. Now, the guide that we developed in 2021 has a 3-step process for lifestyle audits, where the first one is that if this information goes into the e-disclosure system, the ethics officer on the ground will be able to see the information and to verify it against the databases. And in that, they will be able then to see whether there is omissions, or if people omit some of the information, or if it's incomplete, or just plainly lie about information. So if they detect something, then it goes to the second process, which is the investigation process. So last year, a lot of our training was on the review. And this year, it's focusing on the investigation process, where the investigator will then determine whether there's unexplained wealth, and if so, to then move that case to that for the police to further investigate. Now, what I am particularly satisfied is that in the beginning of this year, we still had 24 national departments who did not do lifestyle audits, and we only had 24 national departments that did lifestyle audits out of 43, and we had 71 provincial departments out of 110. But through the process of guiding departments, we currently only have 4 national departments and 9 provincial departments who did not comply with this. And of course, this will be reported to the cabinet and to the minister for further interventions. Then I can also indicate that we have about 9,900 SMS. And from that, 9,536 complied, meaning 96% of SMS members. And this is your core of leadership where you really want to focus the lifestyle attention on. And those 636 that is still outstanding, we are following up and pressurizing them to disclose their finances. But what is for me further indicative of the gradual success of this lifestyle audits is last year, none of the people who submitted were actually submitted to through a lifestyle investigation, where it only focused on the review part. And through the training interventions that we had, currently almost 3,000 non-SMS members are referred for investigations and 200 SMS members. And that doesn't mean that now they are guilty of unexplained wealth or so, but what they found was that there is some failure to disclose some of the vehicles, properties. There's also some that performed business with the state outside, which is a criminal offense under the public service regulations. So that can be referred for criminal investigation. That there's some conflicts of interest. Some didn't declare all their sources. And in some cases, there may be some unexplained wealth. So this is a one policy area where I think the impact is felt currently, but given maturity and the fine-tuning of the system in the next 3 years, I think we will see much better responses and effects out of this lifestyle audit process. Why I can also say that is because in the past we always had a 98% disclosure rate, but now because of the pressure and that we actually look at the submissions, there was a drop in the rate to 96, and that may be interpreted as a way of not submitting so that you can dodge the bullet, but of course it won't help. Then the second area of policy reform that I see that is very good in my regard is the adoption or the development of a central register. In the past, if I, as Solomon, resigned from the public service, I could go to the municipal sphere. I can have a lot of disciplinary cases against me, corruption cases against me, whatever, but it will not be known in the municipal sphere. So we are currently working under the guidance of the presidency to establish a central register. The Minister for Public Service and Administration has the responsibility to pull this through, where we will have one single register for the public administration, all three spheres of government, so that when a person resigns, and even before a disciplinary hearing, that will be then picked up and that there can be decision made. We want to, under the Public Administration Management Act, bring in rules and regulations, norms and standards to indicate that before you appoint a person, you need to look at the register. The panel must then consider the information that is in the register. If the person lied in the person's Z83, then the person's application cannot be processed. If it's detected later on, the person must be dismissed. But we can also then, if a person resigned before a disciplinary hearing, when the person is appointed, then that disciplinary hearing must continue and take its natural course. So that is the other area, and I think that ties in with the discipline management strategy that we adopted this year, where we look at changing the legislation around discipline management that is very old, and also looking at ways to improve case backlogs, and that we address suspensions, and that we address the issue of appeals. Then the other issue that we are busy with as the TAO unit is we are developing a guideline where public servants who witness corruption and they feel that they need protection can then alert the unit, and we can immediately get into contact with the Witness Protection Office, and that this people, if then it's warranted, can be taken in the Witness Protection Program. We already had a few referrals, and the guide is in consultation with DOJ and the Office of Witness Protection, developed and should be finalized very soon. Then maybe just as a end, to also indicate we are improving the consequence management part, because as a previous speaker of one of the other panels also indicated, you cannot leave deeds that need to be reprimanded just to go on. You need to act on that, and you need to take active steps against that action. So what we have done is we worked very close with the Fusion Center, being a member then of the Fusion Center, where there's a discussion of the PPE frauds, the SASA frauds and that, so that we can also take that information to the departments and indicate to them, this is people that's involved in criminal action. Please take the necessary disciplinary action so that that process can also be taken forward. I think that is more or less from my side. If I can, in a very quick span, indicate the current reforms and the current policies that we are focusing on.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad that you had already touched on my second question with regards to the professionalization framework. I'll now move on to Prof. Alexis, who is an associate professor in the School of Economics at the University of Johannesburg. He is also an author and a senior lecturer at the university. So, Prof, if you could also just summarize in both questions from an empirical perspective as well as from the Rwandan perspective, could you elaborate on the role of leadership and societal values in creating a culture that rejects corruption?
Okay, thank you very much indeed for the question. I'm basically going to focus on the theoretical considerations regarding corruption, and then derive strategies from what we know in theory about how corruption works and how it can be subdivided and classified, and then look at strategy any of the segments of corruption. Maybe before I even proceed, it's very important to get back to the actual definition of corruption as it is known in, especially in the economics literature. It is defined as abuse of entrusted office for public gain. It used to be defined as abuse of public office for private gain, but because of the increasing recognition of corruption also in the private sector, or corruption involving a public sector agent and private sector operatives, that definition has evolved to include those categories and not focus simply on abuse of public office. So, from an economics point of view, the main damage caused by corruption is the misallocation of resources. So when we have cases of corruption, we have people who are abusing resources, and the primary damage is to take the resources away from their most efficient use. And this has as a consequence that the economy as a whole is going to underperform what it should have been able to achieve had there not been the corruption case. The second consideration about corruption is that when people engage in acts of corruption, and gain advantages and get away with the advantages because corruption is obviously done in secrecy, then they may tend to specialize in corruption. So rather than engaging in productive activities, they specialize in rent seeking, which further complicates the performance of an economy. And when we go to the ethical considerations, obviously that system is unfair because it takes the resources and the advantages away from those who need them the most. And this is a big societal problem. We are not even talking about the damage to the trust in public institutions, trust in the functioning of the public sector as well as the private sector. But it is here important, as I announced in the beginning, to make a distinction between small acts of corruption involving, let's say, public officials and cases of grand corruption, because they need a different treatment. And in theory, cases of petty corruption, they may even be useful when we have complicated bureaucratic rules and regulations that render the execution of activities inefficient. So we have in corruption theory what we call the greasing the wheels hypothesis, which means that when the regulation, the rules are complex and there are no other means of getting things done, like getting a permit or getting an authorization to start a business. In some cases, the bureaucracy can be circumvented by those small acts of corruption. So in theory, it's not all negative. Even though it's a reprehensible act, it may bring economic benefits. But does it mean that we do not have to combat it? I'm going to respond to that. So the other case is the case of grand corruption, which involved public procurement kind of corruption, in which powerful corporations in private sector who want to gain contract with government actually promise those who are involved in public procurement to give them the so-called kickbacks, big material advantage, and then they get the contract while they are not the most efficient bidders. In the economics literature, it has been proven that those cases are very, very damaging to the economy, in addition to being reprehensible ethically. So it would mean that for a targeted anti-corruption strategy, that distinction needs to be made, and strategy to target grand corruption actually mean that there is a need to change the mentality, not just of the people who are involved in public procurement, but also people who are involved in policy and decision making, because the existence of those possibilities in the procurement policy usually it serves the interests of politicians, because that types of kickbacks is inbuilt in the regulations to allow for democratic countries to allow politicians to have money to fund the elections. It has been proven in different cases. And in cases when we do not have democratic rules, then that money is also mostly used by the high-ranking politicians, even government members, to find a way to co-opt those who are dissenting in order to keep the authoritarian regime running. So to address those types of corruption, there is really a need to look at who is involved in that type of corruption. Target the public officials and the politicians and members of government who are involved by legislation and by removing all the possibilities in the procurement mechanism that would enable politicians to get the kickbacks. So the legislation should be tightened enough to remove all possibilities. But again, since the legislation is also proposed by the politicians themselves, there is a need of higher a shift of mentality, a higher shift of culture that puts the interests of the country ahead of the interests of the politicians to ensure that those cases do not take place. The second part of that strategy is to look at the private corporations that are strong enough to bring in those means that would sway the politicians by the promises of benefits of supporting them with financial resources for corruption. There is a need for legislation. There is a need to go beyond legislation to introduce institutional culture that promote an egalitarian system, because corruption is also the result of inequality in a society, with people without resources trying to gain the resources through a shortcut. I think I can stop there.
Thank you so much, Prof. I think that we are seeing some echoes from yesterday's discussion with regards to transformational organizational ethics coming from all of our speakers in that regard, with Martha, highlighting the importance of collaboration and the involvement of the media when it comes to public sector corruption and trying to mitigate that. It was encouraging to see that in the different countries, both in Malawi and in South Africa, there are some training mechanisms that are in place for the development, for the training and development of public sector officials, which is high, as well as the adoption of the register is going to be extremely helpful in South Africa, and I think it's something that can be applied in other African countries as well. In the interest of time, I'm not sure if we do have time for comments and questions from the floor. I know we're behind time.
Too quick.
Okay, so do we have any questions from the floor? I see one. Is there any other one?
Question online.
And one online. Okay.
Adrian again from Faculty of Business and Economic Sciences. I'm very passionate about value systems, and I'm thinking about our public sector. So I'm thinking about and I'm also thinking about how else can we as civil society reinforce these values within our public sector. How can we keep them accountable other than the elections? What else can we do as civil society? Thank you.
Okay, and the second question is online by Kali Mokon. Good institutions, policy plans, strategy, integrity reforms, behavioral codes, and initiatives designed to take the fight to corruption. Well done. But why do we seem to be barely scratching the surface? Why voices against corruption remain unheard? Why implementation seem to elude us? Why consequence management is not working? Somebody is benefiting. Who is that? I think the elephant is in the room. All the good work we have heard from panelists is a smokescreen. There's not intention to stop corruption for good.
Thank you for those questions. I think in closing, if I could allow the panelists just 2 minutes to respond to those, particularly from a recommendations perspective from the last question, as well as the gentleman who asked about the CSOs. In the interest of time, 2 minutes, I'll start with Martha.
In short, what I would say is that, let's face it, the anti-corruption fight space needs a complete overhaul. It needs a reset. In our various countries, you know how politicians exploit the anti-corruption campaign. We will arrest all the thieves. We will throw them in jail. Nice sound bites. But when it comes to the actual implementation, it's a whole different ballgame. And from what we are saying, at least upon review or analysis of the Malawian history of anti-corruption, as I said, we will never prosecute our way out of corruption. Prosecution has got its own limits. Yes, it validates rule of law. It puts in no on the terms that impunity is not guaranteed. Yes, but it will never sort the big problem of corruption. There are systems, there are cultures that remain constant, even if you prosecute one person or you address one issue. The prosecution authorities, like ourselves, Anti-Corruption Bureau, we are so disconnected from the Ministry Department of Agency where that corruption is taking place. We're only focusing on one narrow issue. So here we are. Let's reset. Let's rethink. We need to overhaul the whole system so that we can have an impact.
Thank you, Martha. I'm not sure if Dr. Salman is still online, but Prof, over to you briefly in 2 minutes to respond. Okay, he is online, so please go first, Dr. Salman.
Sorry, do you steam and hear me?
Yes,
I would like to respond to the question of what can civil society do, because I think that is the most important question that we can answer today. If I went to Kenya in July as part of that National Anti-Corruption Advisory Committee study tour, which I think Philip Gagugia referred to this morning. And the one thing that struck me was the involvement of the society in keeping government accountable and by pushing the agenda of fighting corruption so that government cannot make decisions on its own. And I think in this regard, strategy, we have an implementation plan to that strategy. Nothing stops any civil society to do awareness and training for the population to understand what it is that we want to achieve and what we want to change, and to use the implementation plan to keep us accountable, to write letters to the political representatives and say, why is this not done? Why is that not done? To ask the right questions and even to intervene in cases where it's needed to make their voices heard. Because the only way that we can fight corruption is if we take hands and do it together. To just rely on government or on one component of government will not work. The other issue that a person asks is, why are we just scratching the surface? I think it's to a large degree because we almost started all over again. We have new training sessions. Some people were involved in state capture, in the police, in the NPA, in wherever they are. And one needs to also work around that and get those people out of the system, get new ones trained, get more money allocated to this work. So it's to a large degree almost starting from the scratch. And we also must remember it's a big, massive instrument to change things in government, like the e-disclosure system, to have that in place, to have money available for that. But it's a system that exists now. We could do it. And it is owned by government. It's not outsourced anywhere else. So we don't pay exorbitant money for that system to maintain it. The other thing is also that I've realized that there's a lot of fatigue under the public servants themselves. There's one panelist said, there's a good number of public servants that still really fighting corruption in the work that they do. But there's also a very bad negative connotation on public servants. And that also is something that you need to inspire and keep them also their heads afloat to say that, listen, you are part of the solution. Let's continue, let's carry on, and not only focus on the few bad apples and then paint everyone with the same brush. So I think that also plays a role, just from my side.
Thank you so much, Dr. Solomon. Over to you, Prof, in response and in closing.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we would be making a mistake if we think that we would be able to fight corruption in the public sector by using simply the civil society, even though it can be a very good instrument. Maybe let me refer to the words of a Lebanese poet. The tyranny of corruption would not be capable of ruling over us if there were not tyranny in our own hearts. So if we think of corruption as something that is only present in the public sector and we assume that the rest of the society is clean, then we will continue scratching the surface. If we remember under apartheid, corruption was endemic because in order to maintain such a repressive regime and to make it rule over the population for so long, there were flows of illicit funds and money that was going around, and that created the kind of endemic corruption that the post-apartheid government has not been able or not been willing to remove. So earlier I said corruption goes together with a highly inegalitarian society. Just giving you an example, I have been living in the Netherlands for the last 30 years. Netherlands is a highly egalitarian society. You can accuse them of so many things, but I have not heard of any big corruption scandal in 30 years of existence in the government. So unless the society, the civil society and the public sector and the legislation and the judiciary is ready to create institutions that put the public interest, the general interest of the population ahead of their own interests that entrenched in an egalitarian system, we will keep scratching the surface, blaming one another. So the public sector blaming the private sector blaming the public sector, and then we end up just scratching the surface and forgetting that corruption needs to be extricated from the society as a whole.
Thank you so much, Prof. Prof, echoing sentiments from yesterday as well of having the public interest ahead of self-interest or self-preservation. And if you are in a private organization, it will obviously be having the organizational interest ahead of your own self-interest. I'd like to thank my panelists. If Dr. Solomon could switch on his camera, please. This is the most organized and coordinated panel. Like, we didn't plan this black and blue thing, but we're that cool. So it's different shades of blue and black in this panel. That's how over-prepared we came. We didn't plan it, but I had round of applause for my panelists. Thank you so much. And a round of applause to everyone in the room. I know we are over time, but thank you for staying engaged and concentrating. Thank you.